Hello and welcome to the Haaretz Podcast. I'm Alison Kaplan-Summer in Tel Aviv. As the U.S.-Israel-Iran war intensifies and continues, Israelis across the country are living a new normal, running in and out of their bomb shelters and safe rooms as alerts sound and send them into those shelters every time Iran launches even a single missile into their country. Everyone has the same question in their minds. How long will this last? What is the end game? Will President Donald Trump continue to stay the course that Israel's prime minister clearly wants to pursue and continue to weaken the Iranian regime until its collapse? Or will the U.S. president change course on what is becoming an increasingly unpopular war in the United States? On the podcast today, Haaretz senior defense analyst Amos Harel brings us up to date on the military situation on the ground and how the entrance of Hezbollah into the fighting has affected Israel. And afterwards, Haaretz reporter Judy Maltz takes us on a short tour of the underground tent cities in the Tel Aviv parking lots, where city residents without adequate bomb shelters or safe rooms are taking cover for the night. I visited those parking lots last June during the first round of war with Iran. Judy will explain what has changed and what hasn't the second time around. Those conversations are coming up.
I'm Esther Solomon, Editor-in-Chief of Haaretz English. Around the world, the fight is on to preserve critical and independent media. Haaretz, Israel's oldest newspaper, upholds its long tradition of accurate, committed, and incisive journalism, refusing to bend its reporting to pressure from any government or leader. A digital subscription to Haaretz gives you up-to-the-minute news and analysis in English from journalists who live Israel's reality and are committed to covering the Middle East and its global repercussions.
Amos Harel, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Alison.
Amos, since we last spoke, Hezbollah has become a major front in this war. How has this changed the calculus for the Israeli military and for the Israeli home front? On the other side, we're counting now more than 700,000 Lebanese being displaced by the evacuation orders that the IDF is issuing.
So Hezbollah remains the number two priority. This is still about Iran. This is still an American war, first and foremost. And there's still an attempt to change the strategic arena around Iran and perhaps change the regime as well. Hezbollah was dragged into this because after the Israeli decision to strike and assassinate Khamenei, the Iranian supreme leader, it became a religious matter for them as well. And it was known in advance that they would seek retaliation against Israel. Once they did, it was quite limited in the beginning. There were some Israeli strikes, some rockets launched in response towards the Galilee for the first time since the ceasefire in November 24. But Israel took advantage of the situation. There were some descriptions as if Hezbollah has walked into a trap by responding, and the Israeli response was much more aggressive than anything Hezbollah tried to do. What evolved since then is something quite different, because for quite some time since that ceasefire, most Israeli decision makers, analysts, and so on assumed that Hezbollah was pretty weak, that after the last round of war on the northern front, Hezbollah was afraid of Israel, threatened, and wouldn't risk something more ambitious. Well, in reality, what we see is that in spite of the difference between the IDF's strengths and Hezbollah's, the Lebanese organization can still hit back. They've launched mostly drones towards the Galilee area. They've launched anti-tank missiles and rockets towards Israeli military forces in southern Lebanon. And there were also some attempts of launching rockets towards the Tel Aviv area. So, you know, they're not dead yet. We shouldn't think that this is over with Hezbollah. It's not the same kind of massive threat they appeared to be until the summer of 24, but they're still quite capable of creating damage. On the other hand, the Israeli response is deploying forces, quite massive forces, as what we call first line of defense between the Israeli towns and villages along the border and Hezbollah outposts. And we see constant attacks, airstrikes in Beirut, in the Bekaa Valley, in eastern Lebanon and in southern Lebanon. But again, most of the effort and most of the focus remains on Iran.
Just on Hezbollah, one more question. Many Israelis, including my last guest on this podcast, are saying, wait, we were told that their capabilities were so degraded, that they were so weak. And if that's true, why do we have to hit them so hard now? It's hurting the credibility of the Israeli military and the political echelons such that they have such credibility. Were they deceiving us about the deterioration of Hezbollah capabilities, or they really didn't know that they were capable and would hit back?
Make the distinction between what the IDF was saying, its top brass, and what Netanyahu was saying. And with Netanyahu, the prime minister, time and time again, we saw that after the 12-day war against Iran on June 25, Netanyahu is quite reckless about his announcements of victory, whether it was total victory over Hamas, something that he promised and never delivered, or victory over Iran and Hezbollah. The army was relatively more cautious about that. I think there have been significant gains. I think there was a victory over Hezbollah, but it's never over with these guys. These are guerrilla or terrorist fighters with deep ideological beliefs, religious beliefs. They would never agree to any kind of Israeli presence in the region. And this is why it will go on, and they will fight by any means necessary. It's true that their capabilities have been more limited since the last round of violence, but it's not as if they have nothing to respond with. They fight with what they have right now. Now, I don't like the body count, but in the end, for the time being, we've had 2 casualties inside Lebanon, Israeli soldiers killed by Hezbollah rockets and mortar fire. And it's assumed that more than 300 Hezbollah fighters were killed during the last 9 or 10 days. So this is more or less the balance of power. Hezbollah is perfectly capable of hurting us, of threatening us, of annoying us, but it's not the same organization that seemed as if it could fight almost as equal with the IDF 2 years ago.
Almost back to what you correctly say is the main event, the fighting going on in Iran. There are stories in the media, widespread, about anger, opposition, unhappiness among the Americans over Israel's targeting of Iran's oil field and laying down the line, ordering the Israeli forces to stay away from energy supplies. Is there truth in these stories, and how are the Israelis reacting?
I think there's some truth to this matter, but this was massively exaggerated in some of those reports. The truth of the matter is that the Israelis and the American military are deeply coordinated for months before the attack began. And even now, the command and control are almost shared by the 2 armies. The Israeli Air Force has its own missions to fly. The Americans have others, but they're deeply coordinated, and most of the things are agreed beforehand. What happened in this case is that Israel wanted to make an impression, to send a message by hitting specific, it's not oil fields actually, it's a sort of depots in which they hold gas, mostly for domestic consumption. And it was not about hitting Iran's oil exports to the world, but this was about sending a message. Mostly these very massive clouds of smoke all over the place. It created quite an image. This is what Israel wanted to broadcast, the message that Israel was looking for. The Americans were unhappy about this because there's so much tension in the Gulf, among the Gulf states, and countries like Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Oman, Qatar, and so on have already been struck by Iranian drones and missiles near their oil fields and near their energy infrastructure. And they were, of course, very, very weary that this could turn into an even bigger crisis. So I think the Americans probably felt that Israel took this a step too far, but it's not as if this was out of left field and it was just an Israeli initiative that was not coordinated at all with the Americans. We'll have to see where this leads, because I think, as far as I can tell at this stage of the war, what we have now is not only a strategic crisis or a military crisis, but also an economic one that centers on oil and energy. And we see the president, we see Trump talking more and more about this in recent days. We hear concerns from people around him. And I think if there's a possibility, it's only one of the possible scenarios, but if there's a possibility that the war ends soon, it mostly has to do with the fear in the White House and in the administration that the energy market would be carried away by this crisis, that suddenly the price per barrel of oil would be over $100, and that this would mean a lot for American consumers at home. Already, prices have been up for 40 or 50 cents a gallon in recent days, and this is becoming an issue. Correct me if I'm wrong, you know more about the society than I do, but I think most Americans did not care a lot about the news from the Middle East, but will care quite a lot if they have to pay higher gas prices in the next few months. So this is becoming a crucial issue for the Americans, and we see the Iranians identifying this possible point of weakness as well. Their attempts to close down the Hormuz Straits have to do with the same issues. They now feel that they can apply pressure and threaten their neighbors in a way that would perhaps change the course and the implications of the war. And my sense is that perhaps Israel did not think enough about these strategic results because it was so focused on the nuclear issue and on fighting the ballistic missiles.
Well, definitely, if there's something in common between what people are saying in the U.S. and Israel right now, it is constant speculation on how long will Donald Trump pursue this operation, given its incredible unpopularity, as you mentioned, because of the economic and energy factors, but also just generally because of the political mood of why are we doing this, and the pressure from the Gulf states to end it. They're suffering tremendous damage too. And nearly every expert on Iran saying that regime change in the short term is not in the cards, no matter how many people we assassinate. What is the view on this from the upper echelons in Israel, despite the fact that we're having here tremendous civilian population suffering? We're all on reduced sleep from the multiple sirens during the night. Is there really a belief in the leadership that the longer we get to attack, the more damage that we can do to Iran's capabilities and keep the hope of regime change alive, the better? Are Israeli leaders completely not motivated to end this sooner than later?
So I think there are two separate issues here that are, of course, connected in a way. One, as you mentioned, is the time that this is taking and the price that we pay, the psychological price more than anything else, of going through attacks. These are not very massive attacks. If you compare that to the 12-day war, there were more missiles launched at Israel at that time, and there was more damage. Think of attacks on Tel Aviv, Beersheba, Rehovot, Petach Tikva, and so on, Haifa. Last time, we saw massive incidents in which buildings were destroyed in a radius of hundreds of yards away from where the missiles hit, and so on. And we've had 34 casualties last time from Iranian missiles. This time, if I'm not mistaken, it's around 12, and we've already been through 12 days of fighting. So this is, in fact, the damage and the casualties here are less than last time, but it's on top of everything that we've encountered before. People still remember what it looked like last time, and they were promised at that time that this was the end of it. This is what Netanyahu said publicly, and suddenly dealing with that again, of course, this is, it gets on your nerves, and it's not just annoying. It's frightening. And for families with children who have to go to local municipality shelters, bomb shelters, and if they do not have a safe space at home, especially at night, this is a big deal. It's frightening. It makes you tired. It makes you angry and nervous. It's really a big deal. I'm always a bit suspicious of the generals. Of course, the IDF is in charge of the home front, but they are men in uniform in the end. They do not share the civilian experience, and I'm not sure that they're always aware what this means to a family with kids that has to deal with Zoom classes the morning after, with kids being frightened and so on. I'm not sure that the army is really on top of this as it needs to be. Now, the second issue you've mentioned is, of course, the fate of the regime, because nobody said that in so many words, but it was quite clear that there was an ambition there to overthrow the regime, to finally get rid of the mullahs. And of course, it began with the assassination of Khamenei and others around him. So Trump hinted that this is perhaps part of the goals, and so did Netanyahu, although they never said that in so many words. What I have heard from Israeli generals in the last few days is quite a different version of events. They say the best we can do in this limited time frame is perhaps create the conditions that will finally lead to the collapse of the regime. But we do not think that this would happen in a few days' time, that we can just topple the regime by applying more pressure and bombing more headquarters of Basij or Revolutionary Guards and so on. They're actually saying this is something more complicated. This is a nation of 90 million people, and it will take time. Perhaps finally there will be a sort of a domino effect that would lead to the collapse of the regime, but that may happen, within a few months, after a war, after a ceasefire, and so on. Remember, the June 25 war led in the way to the massive revolt and demonstrations on January 26, but there was a 6 months difference between the Iranian citizens taking to the streets and what happened earlier with the war in Israel, with Israel. So this is where we are. I hear some skepticism, some doubts, and it's mostly about politicians who claim that there's a simple answer to everything, and that all we need to do is apply a little bit more pressure and everything will get settled. I've mentioned that earlier in this interview, but if you look back at Hezbollah and Hamas, again, Israel had the upper hand, but we never had a final and decisive victory. This is not the way things happen around here. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't see this as a very likely result in the near future. And if not, then Trump has to decide where to continue, where to go from here. Does he go for a ceasefire? Does he try to squeeze the Iranians into all kinds of concessions regarding a possible nuclear deal or an end to their ballistic missile program? Or does he insist on overturning the regime and push forward until they finally break?
Well, regarding what Donald Trump is going to do, to use the words of Donald Trump, we'll see what happens. As you said, it's not simple. Nothing happening right now is simple. So I'm very grateful to you, Amos, for coming on the podcast and trying to explain some of it to us. Thanks so much. Stay safe.
Thank you. Stay safe as well.
Coming up, I talked to Haaretz reporter Judy Maltz about her visit to Tel Aviv's underground tent cities. Judy Maltz, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Allison.
So, Judy, in Iran War Season 1 last June, when people without proper protection or who physically were not able to get to shelters, the volunteer organization Brothers in Arms spontaneously created these tent cities in the vast underground parking lots in Tel Aviv. Eventually, they got the blessing and cooperation of city officials. Back then, we visited a few of them. I brought some of the voices of people living there to this podcast. And now, this time around, in Season 2, you spent an evening underground as well and have written an article about it in Haaretz for us. I remember when I went in June, it all felt very last minute and improvised and thrown together. Because this was the second time, did it feel more established and organized now? Can you set the scene for us, what it looks like in these parking lots?
So, yeah, I went to the parking lot, actually the fourth floor underground of the Dizengoff Center shopping mall, which probably is the most popular venue for this right now.
Yeah, that's where I went in June.
So, interestingly, maybe not surprisingly, most of the people people I met there, this was their second round. They had been there in June. It worked out for them. And on Saturday, a week ago Saturday, when Israel and the U.S. attacked Iran, they just packed their bags and came back. They knew the drill already. Some of the people that I met there who had been there in June, they said, well, this time it was much more luxurious. Last time they just ran there with nothing. This time some of them got tents in the middle last time. This time they already had tents. This time they had mattresses. And one of the other advantages, a few people mentioned about this latest round, is that the weather is a lot better because we're in the middle of the, late winter. It's not yet spring here, although the past few days have been pretty warm. But last time it was in mid-June and really very, very hot in an underground parking lot.
So, Judy, let's share some of the conversations you had with people there. The first was a woman named Carmel Weissman, who explained why she was there and what it was like. Tell us just a bit about Carmel before we hear her.
Carmel is a researcher and lecturer at Tel Aviv University. Her field is digital culture. Like the other people I met, this was her second round. She was there with her partner. Actually, when I met her, she was just showing a friend around. She was describing it as a quote-unquote neighborhood tour. She actually mentioned the fact that the first few days it was kind of fun. There was this festival sort of atmosphere there.
It was Purim.
And then there was a wedding one night.
So here's Carmel talking about where she came from and why she was there.
I live in one of those Bauhaus, beautiful houses in the center of Tel Aviv. And usually we're like, the elite here. But during wars, it's actually the opposite. We're the marginalized part of society. We're like refugees all of a sudden because those houses don't have shelters, don't have mamad, safe rooms. And even in the last war, I found myself, I started running for the closest shelter, which I never knew where it is because, nobody cared until then. I'm a heart patient. So for me, running up the hill is a bit difficult. So maybe other people could reach it running during the alarm, but I couldn't. And I was caught outside the place where they already closed the door. And rockets started flying, and there was a falling in Dubnov in that day. It was in June. So, ever since that day, I moved here to Dizengoff Center. And here, the thing is that you don't care about the alarms here. You don't hear them. You don't hear anything. You can sleep the whole night through, which is really important. And so a lot of people from the neighborhood do that. And you see a lot of people already coming. They learned from the last war, so they already came in the first night with the tents and the mattresses and everything because we already had equipment from the last war. So we just took our equipment, stuff that I never thought that I'll have to use again, right? So this is now the most valuable piece of real estate in Tel Aviv. And especially in the first nights, it was crowded. So people kept their parking spot. Like it's organized like a parking space. So you have the numbers of the rows and the parking spots. It's a bit like land registry. You have your own spot and you leave your stuff there. Nobody touches it. But then even when people try to sleep at home or go home in the middle of the day, they leave their stuff there because you don't leave your space. You might not be able to come back here. So a lot of people keep their precious real estate here. Yeah. And, it already has its vibe. Like I live, quote unquote, in the northern side, let's say. It's the northern side of a shelter. And it's a bit like those neighborhoods that are beyond the Yarkon River, all the family neighborhoods, very quiet. People come with kids and put up those signs, baby sleeping, shh, stuff like that. And it's respected. While on the other side where we stand right now, I call it Florentine, as this is the place where you had Purim and a wedding, and all the events are here. And there's a nice coffee shop that two people opened, and they cook stuff and give it away for free.
Judy, you also spoke to a woman you met named Sienna, who didn't want her last name given.
Yeah, she didn't want her last name given because she said she has a lot of family in the UK and they were very worried about her and she didn't want them to know that she was sleeping in a parking lot.
So here's Sienna talking about why she's in the parking lot of Dizengoff Center living in a tent.
I don't have the time to run from my apartment to a miklat. My building is not safe. I don't specifically wake up from alarms. Like, this is the safest area for me to be. Like, if I can sleep, if I can be, I don't need to be worried that like I'm gonna miss it and the missile will hit my building. Yeah, and at the end of the day, I've also met here wonderful people. So it's also got like a slight community aspect to it.
So after she said that, I noticed that she had a lock on her tent. And I asked her why she had this lock on her tent. So she explained why.
Because I've seen people who come and wander around, not the people staying here, but I've seen people that just come in here if it's during the sirens or if it's during events that they've created here that kind of creates like a ruckus. People try and get into people's tents, open their bags, take things. You know, I've seen people basically vandalize in a very discreet way. And at the end of the day, I'm a woman sleeping in a parking lot. I do not feel safe to a certain degree to do that. To a certain degree, I do feel safe, but also I'd rather, if I can, protect myself the best way I can. And also, I leave my things here. Like, if I'm going out to the supermarket or going for a walk or going to breathe some fresh air, I can't pack everything with me every single time, and I do not trust that no one will take my things. And it's not that I can't trust the people who are actually here. It's specifically the people who come from outside, because they sadly very much disrespect other people's properties.
So, Judy, we've heard from Carmel and Sienna. Overall, what kind of people were there living in tents underneath Dizengoff Center Mall? Can you characterize the people who were there, the reasons that they were there? Why were they there?
So you have a mixed bag. I would say there are a lot of migrants, foreign migrants. I assume these people live in South Tel Aviv. A lot of Filipino families who are here. Many of them are caregivers. You had a lot of people from Israelis from other poorer neighborhoods, people who simply don't have safe rooms in their houses or don't have nearby bomb shelters. You had people who were physically incapacitated. They couldn't run. I mean, you know, Allison, they tell you get 10 minutes, but often you don't get that 10 minutes. And when you have to start running with a few minutes left and start looking for a bomb shelter or any sort of safe haven, it's very difficult and very stressful. But you didn't only have poor people there or immigrants. There were a lot of people from some of the most desirable neighborhoods in Tel Aviv there. One woman, for example, I met, 94-year-old woman, this amazing person who seemed to be extremely popular down there in the underground shelter. She lived upstairs from the mall. There is a tower, one of the first residential towers ever built in Tel Aviv. She lives on the 20th floor. But when that building was built, there were no safe rooms. So she was sleeping there. Unlike everyone else, though, she does not sleep in a mattress on the floor. She really wanted us to see this bed she had created for herself, where she had taken 3 chairs and pushed them together, and she slept on that so that she wouldn't have a problem getting up. And the other thing this woman really wanted us to see down there was the bathrooms, which were horrendous. They have squat bathrooms down there. Now, just imagine if you're 94 years old and you have to use a bathroom like that. And she promised that the first thing she's going to do when this war is over is bring the mayor there to see the situation of the bathroom.
And she had some historical perspective, right?
Oh, yeah. She was 8 years old in 1940 when the Italians bombed Tel Aviv the first time.
Amazing. So we can know that as much as we feel like these are unprecedented times, that Tel Aviv has been bombed before.
Yeah, but how many other people can remember it?
Judy, as the war wears on, presuming it does, do you see these encampments in the parking lots growing or getting smaller as people find other solutions?
Well, I don't think they can grow that much more because pretty much every parking space available is taken by these tents and mattresses. What we have been seeing in the past few days is that fewer people are sleeping there. They're not sleeping there, but they're leaving their stuff there just in case. As this woman, Carmel, said when her friend asked her about it, she said, this is the most valuable real estate in Tel Aviv today. You don't give up your spot.
Judy, I can't resist. Now that I've got you on in my studio, you are spending the war sort of the opposite of underground, in the sky. You live in a tower on the 33rd floor, very, very close to the Kiryat, to Israel military headquarters, and very close to the interceptors. So you hear the missiles that are intercepting the incoming Iranian missiles go off. It sounds like a very intense place to be. What is it like for you?
When this war started, first of all, my husband and I decided we need to get out of town. We're not going through this again. And we went and spent 4 days in Jerusalem, and under the mistaken assumption that they're not going to hit Jerusalem. But they did. So we figured, well, we might as well go back home. And what we learned by then is that many people who live on the upper floors of our building were going down to the underground parking lot, which also in our building is the place, it has been certified by the city as a proper bomb shelter. The only problem is that when you live on the 33rd floor and you have fewer than 10 minutes to get down to -4, it's pretty risky, because just imagine that elevator opens every couple of floors, and very often we are running in just as the sirens are sounding. So at one point we said, this is ridiculous, too much pressure. So right now we've been staying up on the 33rd floor and trying to be calm as much as possible.
But you really hear the booms because you're up there. You hear the interceptions practically in front of your face.
Yeah, but it's scarier is whenever those interceptors go up. It actually feels as if a plane is going up through the building.
Well, Judy, we're living in interesting times, in an interesting place. We all hope somehow that this war will resolve itself sooner rather than later, and that everyone stays safe. As I wished Amos, I'll also wish you to stay safe and keep calm.
You too, Allison.
And that's it for this episode of the Haaretz Podcast. Thanks to my guests, Amos Harel and Judy Maltz, and to producer and editor Adi Shacham. If you want to continue to listen to the podcast and never miss an episode, subscribe to us on Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts, and leave us a 5-star rating so more people can find us. And to keep up with all the latest news on Israel, the Middle East, and the Jewish world, including the latest on the current war, don't forget to subscribe and follow Haaretz.com. I'm Alison Kaplan-Summer, and until next time, shalom from Tel Aviv.